Aşağıda record seçeneği var hocam.
Anlıyor şu an.
Tamam.
Hocam mikrofonunuz kapalı.
Sorry about it. Is this chapter or this part in the book Handbook of Economics, Philosophy of Economics, is a rather brief, but which has an ideological position in the study of philosophy of economics. It rather looks at the methodology of economics. But when we talk about philosophy of economics and ontologies in it, we talk a lot about ontology. The way we study economics, the methodology, the ethical principles, the formalism of economic science, to what extent it is science, how do we study this economic science, is all parts of philosophy of economics. Now, when people talk about, when people are introduced with the idea of philosophy of economics, people think that they're going to comprehend topics like rather abstract topics, like the ancient philosophical topics of thinking. But indeed, it is rather about the way economics is pursued as a science, and that is studied by philosophers of economics. Yes, so when we talk about philosophy of economics, we talk about what economics is, rather than just thinking abstract and imagining abstract concepts. Yes, because philosophy has such a meaning. I mean, what do you do? I do a lot of philosophy. So what do you do? I think a lot. No, when we talk about philosophy, we talk about methodology. We talk about science, yes, of economics. So this is it. Now, we were talking about 4 sets of core sets of assumptions of philosophy of science. Remember them? I did tell them. Then we went into some general core assumptions of philosophy of science, 7 of them. Then I went into the general equilibrium theory. Then we talk about the tenets, the rules of philosophy of science, 7 of them. And we came to a point where we were talking about how economic models or studies were developed. The first one was the development of massive computing power. And as a result, what happened in the study of economic science? The rise of game theory, secondly. And thirdly, the interdisciplinarity of economics, because it's a multifarious topic. It's not a single acute or a narrow-minded study, a single study, a monolithic study. It is a rather a science which has relationships with other sciences or disciplines. Now, this is also very interesting. I shall come to this topic. I don't think that we have studied the multidisciplinarity, but I shall, today I shall talk about empirical experimentation and the interdisciplinarity of economics, we did game theory, and we did the rise of massive computing power, which enabled us to understand economics and the current state of economics. Now I shall pass these because we've done these. As far as I remember, this we didn't do interdisciplinarity. Yes,
Yes.
We didn't do interdisciplinarity. Now there is a difference in economics. The difference of economics with other sciences is that although it is refutable, now physics is physics. It has literal relationship with biology. Yes, this is how it is. Is it so? Not really. Because we know that even in biology, there is a lot of relationship with the discipline of physics or chemistry. So no science is separate from all other sciences. All sciences are interlocked. They are intertwined to a certain extent. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're all one because of the specialization. Immense specialization, more and more specialization, but at the same time, although this diagonal or vertical specialization, at the same time, we see in the world that everything is intermingled. Nothing is separate from each other. And in economics, there was a time when economists felt like natural scientists and thought that they had nothing to do with other social sciences. So they felt that they were separate from all other disciplines. But in the last 20, 30 years, this changed to a certain extent. Now, Hausman, I did tell you that Hausman is a very important man in United States on philosophy of economics. But Tony Lawson is another dimension. Yes, he's in Cambridge. He is a rather more sophisticated guy. Yes, his contributions are, in a sense, much more important. But Hausman is a very good, probably the #1 guy in general philosophy of economics, and he has a book called The Enact and Separate Science of Economics. In other words, he discusses whether economics is completely separate as an economic science or not. Now, one of the important things is that until today, well, until the very recent decades, there was the neoclassical approach in economics created a belief, a judgment, but probably not a proper, correct judgment, that utility was a non-human concept, and it was kind of de-psychologizing the study of economics from psychology and other social disciplines, social sciences. So in neoclassical economics, there is the assumption of monolithic agents, so everybody is the same. There is nobody who likes something more and somebody who likes something less. Somebody who is, I mean, there are no cultural differences, no personal differences, no social norms, nothing. It's all the mentalistic concepts are banished. There is no belief, desire. The agencies are all the same, yes? So psychology and human behavioral differences are all external from the analysis. The utility concept is there, and the utility concept may rise or decline, but it doesn't differ from one person to another, and it doesn't differ from one instance to another, unless there is another change. Now, Samuelson's revealed preference theory, this is something very important in the game theory too, because Samuelson's revealed preference theory is the core of neoclassical consumption theory, and the way you gather, you examine, or you you gather, the way you gather the preferences of an individual is through its past preferences, and you think that due to his past preferences, he will most probably prefer A to C because he's preferred A to B, B to C. So we'll expect that he's going to prefer, and he's done it so many times. So we know that he's going to prefer A to C under certain assumptions. Now, this was the core of neoclassical economics. So there was nothing in it which could make a difference in belief, desire, and other behavioral patterns. Now, the recent behavioral economics had or did a big contribution to economics, showing that attempts to divorce economics and psychology should fail. They made economics more interrelated to psychology. And indeed, the Nobel Prizes were given to such people who did a lot of behavioral studies or experimental studies in economics. Now, the methodological individualism is about psychology and economics. If you believe in methodological individualism, that means that economics has nothing to do with psychology. Then you divorce them, yes. Otherwise, you believe that there is an interrelationship. The two overlap, not always, but in a lot of cases. Now, representative agent model is also another important concept, in the sense that we talk about micro foundations of macroeconomics, seeking to find out whether what we study, macroeconomics is studying macro concepts and short-term concepts in economics, but we never talk about the foundations, the microeconomic foundations of macroeconomics, and we generally assume that there is a competitive structure. Once we say that there is no competitive structure, the entire macroeconomic analysis changes. For example, if you believe that there is oligopolistic markets, then you get into price stickiness, and the price stickiness changes to mathematical analysis. So macroeconomics is very, very crucial, or the micro foundations is very crucial, and it had become crucial in the 1980s. Yes, basically in the 1980s, economists were interested in the micro foundations of macroeconomics, and they did a lot of mathematics to sort out the differences, the macroeconomic differences of macroeconomics. Now, could you, the book says, and it's an interesting question, but is it a plausible question? That's another thing. Could you talk about the macro foundations of microeconomics? Now, it's never been studied, true. I mean, well, not never, but I mean, there isn't an extensive area of studies on the macro foundations of microeconomics. In other words, under certain macroeconomic conditions, how does markets behave? Certain markets behave. Now, that's another issue which it has to be modeled. I'm not saying that we know nothing about it, or we can't say anything about it. Of course, we know that under, say, hyperinflation, maybe oligopolistic markets and monopolistic markets could differ in their behavior. Well, we can do some analysis, but there is no model. There is no formal model or mathematical modeling of such an analysis. Now, another concept which is used is neuroeconomics. Indeed, some talk about neuroscience, as you see in the bottom line. Now, neuroeconomics is about the combination of psychology and economics. Why? Because neural is about your nerves, about what you feel. It's about sentiments, the feelings, and the feelings of individuals vary, and you have to have senses a priori to your behavior. You can't behave without senses. Your behavior is a reaction, a reflective reaction, so there has to be nerves. So neuroeconomics is about the first part of your psychology. The reason why I call it the first part of psychology is about sensing. The second part of psychology is about behaving. Now, in that behavior, we talk of if that behavior is an economic behavior, then it is neuroeconomics. Now, Daniel Kahneman, you know that he had a Nobel Prize, and he had a very well-read book. Well, actually, I can't find the book. Yeah. This guy won a Nobel Prize. He is not a technical economist as such, but he's good in psychology, yes, which provided him a Nobel Prize. Now, why did he get a Nobel Prize? Because he challenged expected utility theory. Now, you know that in expected utility theory, there is one, a probability, and two, the revealed preference, the utility and revealed preference in combination, and accordingly, the choice is made. The consumer choice is molded. Yes. Now, what he said was, I didn't get into details here, but what he said was, he talked about prospects. Now, the prospect is rather different in the sense that there are payoffs, positive payoffs, and possible losses which could occur together. Now, an individual would calculate both or resume a result and make his decision, but the dominant factor is those gains. In other words, assume that you have two choices in the perspective. One has a gain of 100 and a loss of 50. So the net gain is 50. The other one gain is 90 and the loss is 40. So you would naturally, I mean, I didn't put probability, I just put the loss and gain values, yes, assuming the probability is fixed for both of them. In the prospect theory, the individual would prefer the first one. because there's a higher gain in one of them. Yes? Although the loss is a little bit larger, he is geared, motivated to get the highest reward. Yes? So the prospect theory is a fruitful theory in changing the entire expected utility theory, changing the macroeconomic thinking from neoclassical economics to a rather non-neoclassical comprehension. Yes. Now, Guala is also another important contributor. I think I did tell you about Guala, didn't I? Didn't I tell you about the how experimenters mold or form their behavior? Didn't I? I think I did talk about Guala, maybe. Now, Guala says each individual or each agent has a library of phenomena. Each experimenter has a library of phenomena, in the sense that you do an action and you see what happens. Yes, you get the response, the behavioral response to your risk, and you pile them to a library, which is your memory. Yes, basically, and in your memory, you know what will happen if you act A, and if you act B, and if you act C. Yes, so he says the human mind is a library of phenomena. Yes, I did tell you that Daniel Kahneman won his Nobel Prize in 2006 on psychological experiments. He analyzed, or he proposed, prospect theory against revealed preference, choice and valuation functions, for choice and valuation functions, to explain choice and valuation functions. As I said, the prospect theory assumes that losses and gains, now the gains are in red, you see here in the presentation, are valued differently, not together. Because if you take them together, then you get the net gain of 50, they're both the same. But he has also in mind that there should be a gain. And thus individuals make decisions based on perceived gains instead of perceived losses. Şu kısmı Türkçe anlatacağım. Normal koşullarda gainlerle lossları çıkarıp net result'a göre karar verirsinizden farklı olarak prospect theory'de gross gain'inin önemi olduğunu ve buna göre karar verildiğini düşünüyor. Bu şu demek değil tabii. Loss'u hiç düşünmez değil ama difference üzerinden karar vermiyor demek. Bu başlı başına bir şey değişikliği. Human behavior değişikliği. Also known as the loss aversion theory, the general concept is that if two choices are put before an individual, there's also the loss aversion theory. Both equal, I gave you both equal examples anyway. Which one presented in terms of potential gains and the other in terms of potential losses, the former option will be chosen. Eğer ki, ben de size bunu anlatmaya çalıştım, örneğim de kötü bir örnek değildi diye düşünüyorum. Bir kişinin karşısına 2 tane opsiyon koyarsanız, her ikisinin de gainleri ve lossları var tabii. Loss aversion, yani kayıp, zarardan kaçma, zarardan uzaklaşma teorisi ne göre en fazla gain'i seçer. Yani en az loss'u seçer değil, en fazla gain'i seçer diyor. Burası son derece önemli. Now, the second area about interdisciplinarity of economics. Now, this doesn't mean that economics is solely interrelated with psychology and sociology, but economics is a rather a lot of interrelationship with sociology. Now, rival accounts of fundamental human motivation. Now, economics is interested in individualistic avariciousness, spending a lot, yes, spending and spending. Sociologists are interested in the drive for social status. There are two different motivations in the study of these two disciplines. If they're two separate, then how can they be combined? I mean, where do they interact, and how can they be combined? Economists model short-run phenomena with static preferences. This is rather neoclassical, but it is it. The preferences do not change. And then we sit down with a piece of paper and pen, and then we try to drive the formulas and the models, and try to sort out results from our models. Yes, and they're short-run models. I mean, we never have models of 50 years or 30 years or 20 years. The model is at most 1 year. There is no model in economics unless we talk about growth, and even that is not for 5 years. The time span in economics is rather short. But in sociology, they have medium-run models. The time span is never 1 month or 2 months or 3 months in social development or social change. And these medium-run models with endogenous institutional and group normative variables. In other words, in models, there are two group of or set of endogenous variables. One institutional, yes. The other is group normative variables. In other words, cultural values or other collective values. Now, economists embrace the two. In other words, both together. Formal and quantitative models before the rise of game theory. Now, economists try to embrace the two, sociology and economics, but they lacked a formal technology. Game theory provided this technology. Game theory provided or enabled economists to link short-run and long-run accounts, because thus they were able to model, although at a very primitive level, individualistic behavioral differences or group differences, and try to combine these two accounts. Now, the word rigor, on the other hand, is used a lot by economists, and it's also used by sociologists recently in the last 30 years. What we call rigor is, you know the meaning of rigor. Rigor means a lot of difficulty, yes? But economists use the word rigor in the sense of using a lot of mathematics, because it's difficult to use mathematics, and it's a lot of rigor, they say. Yeah, it's a lot of derivation. Yes. So, back to methodological individualism, is an ideological and philosophical prejudice. It is a prejudice to see that economics is completely separate, rather than a scientifically justified principle. So we negate, we counter the belief or the proposition that economics is completely separate from all other sciences, all other disciplines. There is a fusion of economics and sociology, and it is likelier than a merger with psychology. Now, this position is put by the chapter or the part which I've read, which I hardly can understand because the last 30 years, but particularly the last 30 years, had been a lot of psychological, a lot of economic analysis with the tools of psychology. But we have observed very little sociology in economics in the last 30 years. I mean, on the whole, yes, if you're talking about political economy, yes, there's a lot of sociology. But if you're talking about the economic analysis, the technical analysis, there's more psychology in it. So the book uses this dictum that the fusion of economics and sociology is likelier than a merger with psychology. Now, there are two words that's not confuse them. One is fusion, one is merger. In fusion, it becomes one part. In merger, the separateness is still preserved. Yes, economics and psychology are still separate but together. The other one is one piece, they're mixed. Yes, this is very hard to me, or let me say in a very academic sentence. This needs a lot of elaboration and explanation. This sentence needs more explanation. Yes. En diplomatik, akademik diplomatik bir dille ifade edeyim. Bunun daha fazla açıklamaya ihtiyacı var. Yes. Now, let's come to biology. How do we combine biology and economics? Yes. What is the bridge? The bridge is generally game theory, like psychology. Yes. Game theory has provided us a lot. This is what is being said in philosophy of economics. I mean, if you open up any book on philosophy of economics, you see a lot of game theory in it because that was the main change in economics in the last 30, 40 years, especially since experimental economics or behavioral economics. Now, you know the Darwinian selection mechanism. Everybody knows about the Darwinian selection mechanism of humankind. We all come from monkeys and the monkeys come from microorganisms, whatever it is, yes? But it's a theory, yes? It's not a theorem. The important part here for economics is the selection mechanism. Multiple long-run gains in genetic dispositions of individual organisms, in the sense that you know that in Darwinian genetic selection mechanism, the mechanism is towards the good, the better, always to the better. Now, in economic behavior, just like the selection mechanism of Darwin, you go to the better and better, although not right away, not in one shot, but in repetitive gains, you go towards a good, to a better solution. The maximand, which is the best, yes, is fitness rather than utility. This is a very important one. Now, fitness and utility are two separate things. Utility is neoclassical. Fitness is a biological concept. You may not get the maximum utility, but you get the maximum in fitness. So it's a robust solution. It's a robust equilibrium, a stable equilibrium, yes? Now, there is a bidirectional mapping between Maynard-Smith's dynamic equilibrium and evolutionary stable strategy. What does it mean? Two things. One, it provides a canonical and rigorous framework for modeling evolutionary competition for the organization of production. I shall explain it both. 2, establishment of relationships between dynamic and static solution concepts in game theory has shed light to the understanding of dubious Nash equilibria with respect to refinements of rationality. Now, Maynard Smith brought into economics a concept called dynamic equilibrium. It was, we're not talking about multiple equilibrium. We're talking about dynamic equilibrium. It's an analytical result. Yes. Evolutionary stable strategy is what I try to explain. You evolve into a stable, you have a strategy which evolves to stability. So this is a combination of the two, and this provides us, canonical means about the church, about the laws of the church, yes, the laws of the papacy, for example, yes. Yes, it is it. I mean, the kind of not religious laws, but rules given by the church. Yes. And rigorous, you know what rigor is, framework for modeling evolutionary competition for the organization of production. So these concepts provides us a new understanding of the organization of production in competitive markets. One, it provides us the understanding of dynamic and static solution differences provided by game theory, or understand Nash equilibria, dubious Nash equilibria, with respect to refinements of rationality. I do explain these in philosophy of economics because Nash equilibria are not always the rational solutions. I mean, there may be non-rationality in the Nash solution, yes, by mistake or by, for example, the Campbell game. Yeah, there may be many cases where rationality is defined how the dubious Nash equilibria could be understood. What is dubious could be better understood. Now, one thing else about biology. Oops. Yes, behavioral ecology, maximize expected fitness. I did tell you this. Maximize expected fitness, not utility, but fitness. That's why we talk about biology and fitness. It's not neoclassical. We use a lot of game theory. Have you studied Bertrand and von Stackelberg? No? You did. Where did you study it?
Actually, we all studied in the micro last semester.
Yes, here in Marmara.
Yes, yes.
Yes, there are two kinds of oligopolistic solutions, Bertrand solution and Stackelberg solution. Yes, so it is about, it is an equilibrium. Yes, And in that equilibrium, yeah, we can. I mean, it's if you're talking about fitness, as I said, you talk about stability, and thus not utility. Yeah, this is it. I mean, simple. Now I know the concept is animal learning literature. Animal learning literature is like the Pavlov theorem. You put rewards and the reward rates, you try to maximize the reward rates. That's the animal learning literature. And in learning is also a very important concept, although a biological concept, yes, but we use a lot in economics. In many areas of economics, especially rational expectations, as this learning process, and says or argues that by the learning process, repetitive mistakes cannot exist. So people learn. And it also provides the basis for rationality in economics. For rationality, you need learning. So we put 3 areas of multi or interdisciplinarity in economics: psychology, sociology, and biology. There's also another one, anthropology. But which anthropology are we talking about? There are 2 types of anthropology: social anthropology and classical anthropology. Yes? Now here we're talking rather about social anthropology. Yes? So we talk about the institutional change, for example. Specific social norms that adapt people's incentives efficiently. Long-run cultural changes, evolution that makes capitalism possible. Ultimatum games of small-scale societies. Now, let me start from the bottom one and then explain the other ones. Now, do all of you know about the ultimatum game in game theory? That there is a proposer and there is an acceptor. The proposer has the ultimate power. Yes? It prepares the choice. It designs the choice. It kind of designs the game. But he designs his game with respect to the respondents' he prepares the proposition with an assessment of the respondent's response. So it's not a totally irrespective game. He has to assess the respondent's reaction, because if the respondent says no, rejects, then he gets nothing. So he has to assess. Now, how does he make the assessment? He makes the assessment by assessing the social norms and the prospective behavioral results of those social norms. For example, in a Turkish society, yes, in the Turkish society, your proposal would be different to somebody to travel with you than to somebody in, say, France, because you could expect that the reactions would not be the same. So the social norms make a lot of difference. Even in the ultimate games, social norms are very important. They determine what the reaction is going to be. Now, the second thing is, capitalism worked until today. How did it survive until today? Now, the long-run cultural evolution, in the sense that adaptation of societies made capitalism work. If societies were static, then capitalism would be confronted with a crisis. Now, society has changed and made capitalism work. That means, and we are talking about capitalism, we economists are all capitalists in a sense, although some of them may not like capitalism or dislike capitalism, but we all do the analysis of capitalism. Now, capitalism survives. How? Its nature changes. Yes, its nature changes with respect to the social change. If cultural evolution was not possible, then capitalism would not work, would not operate. So we explain the second line. When we come to the top line, individual incentives are important, and people's incentives construe social norms. There is an interrelationship between social norms and individuals' incentives. As I said, my proposition in Turkey and my proposition in France to somebody else in the ultimate game would be different. Because I would expect different results from these respondents. Yes. And these are caused by social norms. Now we're coming to the conclusion. Economics has been in close contact with political philosophy, 1. 2, public choice and political science. I shall explain what this is. What is political science and what is public choice political science? And 3, normative decision theory. Now, certainly, economics has close relationship with political philosophy. And indeed, the early economists had also been political philosophers. Pre-19th century are all political philosophers who also wrote on economics. John Stuart Mill, yes, or political philosopher, and at the same time an economist. He was talking about utility theory, for example. Bentham. Anyway, the examples are multiple. Now, the second one, the public choice political science, is in the sense that the choice theory, the voting behavior in political science, is the most important concept. Because societies, individuals, groups, classes, professions, whatever it is, cultural groups, they have choices and voting behavior. Once you use voting behavior in political science, which is the public choice theory, its methodology is also used in economics. And you have a course as public choice anyway. Yes, public economics, public choice. So the close contact is being established between political science and economics with respect to its methodology. And thirdly, the normative decision theory. This is most important because the decision theory, which is used in economics, is exactly the same with other social sciences. How decision is made, how decision is construed, how decision is formed for individuals or any other agents. Now, welfare economics and its cousin in philosophy is applied utilitarianism. Welfare economics its cousin is, in philosophy, is utilitarianism. One may say that no, in welfare economics, I do not consider utilitarianism. Okay, that may be the case. There are other theories too, but utilitarianism is one of the approaches in welfare economics. Let me repeat the sentence. Utilitarianism or utilitarian approach in welfare economics is one of the main approaches in welfare economics. There are other approaches. There are Marxian approaches, rather radical, or there can be the Rawlsian approach, the egalitarian approach, the justice approach, and so on. Now, the formal welfare economics, this kind of, were left behind due to the doubts on quantitative interpersonal comparisons. Now, as interpersonal comparisons were not made or could not be made by welfare economics, they were left behind. So it is the formal, the conventional welfare economics is something old, something past. In the post-war years, economists were busy with welfare optima at general equilibrium this time, and philosophers were busy with conceptual analysis of moral language. This was a divestiture. It was a divergence between economists and philosophers, although they combined again in the post-war years. One was very much interested in general equilibria, designing, trying to find the optimum in general equilibria. The other one was very much concentrated to moral language. Ahlaki bir dil, yani nedir ahlaki olan? İşte adalet, başka konseptler, yani felsefe İkinci Dünya Savaşı'ndan sonra moral konulara girdi. Very much Kantian, yes. Economists were interested in disequilibrium and equilibrium in the post-war years, since Keynes. Now, here we come to the very important concepts, Rawls and Kant. Rawls, those who are interested in philosophy, or political philosophy, I should recommend them John Rawls, The Idea of Justice, or The Theory of Justice, Justice as Fairness. Thick books, hard to understand, yes, but an American political philosopher who has very much influenced political philosophy, and he had his roots from Kant, Immanuel Kant. Now, those who are interested in classical philosophy will see the dimension, the Rousseau-Kant dimension, which rests on a lot of ethics with justice, yes, moral justice. I'm not going to get into details because this topic is not about it, but Rawls, by using Kantian let's say comprehension again, yes, or understanding, he rejected utilitarianism. Thus, he had little connection with conventional economics, you may say, because the utilitarians, as they use a lot of the concept of utility in welfare economics, in welfare social science, they were more interrelated with economics. But you will see that in Ken Binmore, who was a game theorist and mathematician, he used the Rawlsian results or analysis and inserted them into game analysis. So Binmore, in his old experimental economics, used Rawls in game theory. Now, Harsanyi, for example, also a very top economist, he used formal utilitarianism. In what we mean by formal utilitarianism is utilitarianism, but formality is the rigor, the maths you use, yes, the modeling you use. Resuscitation is, you know, resuscitation in when somebody dies, to make somebody back to life again. Yes, you pump his heart and, yes, you know that word? When somebody dies, they pump his heart and try to make him live again. That's the word, to resuscitate. Yes? Now, Harsanyi tried to make utilitarianism live again. Why? Because utilitarianism had died, was in the back, in the past. Yes. Now, one other theorem, which is mentioned in this part, is the Lipsey-Lancaster theorem. The Lancaster theorem, Lipsey-Lancaster theorem, is about the second best. You know, second best, very good. Not first best, but the second best. When there is no first best, in existence of first best, then amongst the choices, you find the best. The first best is impossible. It's abstract, it's impossible, but the second best is possible. It's among the alternatives, and you choose that. If one optimality condition in a model cannot be satisfied, which is the first best, the next best solution is changing other variables away from the values that would otherwise be optimal. Second best. If a particular market distortion cannot be removed, this is also, again, about second best. If a particular market distortion cannot be removed completely, so you cannot get to first best, yes? The first best is a non-distorted market, a perfect market, but you can't get it. You can't get rid of the market distortion completely. Another market distortion in an independent market may partially counteract the first and lead to a more efficient outcome. So you bring forth a certain market distortion, which is not as good as, which is of course not as good as the first bet because there is a market distortion, but that market distortion may bring you a more efficient outcome than the present alternatives. Yes, this is you know about the second best. Now, the Arrow's impossibility model. Oh, we had a lot of things to do. I have to be quick. Now, who knows about Arrow's impossibility theorem? Who doesn't know about Arrow's impossibility theorem? Rebbe, you know about Arrow? Arrow-Dobra models.
Hocam duydum ama tam hatırlayamıyorum.
Now, Arrow is about the voting structure. Yes. It's a typical public choice analysis. a social choice paradox illustrating the impossibility of having an ideal voting structure. How do you have an ideal voting structure? You have to have certain rules or precepts which will provide you the best mechanism of voting. A clear order of preferences cannot be determined while adhering to mandatory principles of fair voting procedures. How do we have a fair election? How do we have a fair election? Yes. Your preferences, your ordering cannot be perfect unless you have certain principles, mandatory principles, for these voting procedures. One, non-dictatorship. My name is not Draghi. Don't you think that I'm Draghi? And when I say non-dictatorship, I imply somebody. No. What I'm saying is a general rule, which means that the wishes of multiple voters should be taken into consideration. So everybody should be able to have a say. So nobody should be left out. Otherwise, if some people are not able to vote, what happens is there will be a majority rule, but there won't be a minority representation, which will lead to a dictatorship. So everybody should vote. Now, it's not said full participation because the rule is non-dictatorship. The second one is Pareto efficiency. Unanimous individual preferences must be respected. If every voter prefers candidate A over B, candidate A should win. Simple. All voting should be respected, and if everybody is choosing A, then A should win. Let A win because that's the Pareto efficient result. Because everybody prefers that. Unanimity is everybody. Yes. Everybody's choice. Then if everybody chooses, that means that it's the best choice, the Pareto efficient choice. 3, independence of irrelevant alternatives. If a choice is removed from the basket, then the other's order should not change. Now, this is crucially important. Let me give you the example, then explain. If candidate A ranks ahead of B, candidate B, yes, A is chosen, candidate A should still be ahead of candidate B, even a third candidate, C, is removed from participation. Seçimlerden birisi çıktığında, dışarı çıkarttığımızda, sonucun, yani bir sonucumuz var ve sonuç şu, hep beraber bir seçim yaptık, Erdoğan seçildi. Bu seçimde Doğu Perinçek de adaydı. Doğu Perinçek seçilmedi. Biz onu çıkarsaydık seçimden sonuç değişmeyecekti. If a choice is removed, then the other's order should not change. Çünkü hepimiz A'yı B'ye, B'yi C'ye tercih ediyoruz. Atıyorum. Daha da sert bir örnek vereyim, katı. C'yi çıkarttığımız zaman bir şey fark etmez. Zaten biz A'yı B'yi, B'yi de C'yi tercih ediyoruz. C'yi çıkarsan ne fark eder? Yine A seçilecek. Independence of irrelevant alternatives. Yani irrelevant dediğimiz o artık en önemsiz. Tamam mı burası da? Üçüncüsü. Arrow's Impossibility Theorem. Neyle alakalı? Seçimlerle alakalı. Ideal voting structure diyor. Ne konusu bu? Public choice konusu. Number 4. Unrestricted domain. Voting must account for all individual preferences. Herkesin tercihlerinin dikkate alınması gerekiyor. Herkesin oy vermesiyle herkesin oylarının dikkate alınması ayrı şeyler, dikkat ediniz. Şeyle karıştırmayalım. Non-dictatorship'la karıştırmayalım. Non-dictatorship, dictatorship'in oluşmaması demek. Unrestricted domain, herkesin yani domaini sınırlamamak demek. Finally, social ordering. Each individual should be able to order the choices in any way and indicate ties. Bu tercihlerimizi yaparken yani her kişi tercihlerini yapabilmeli ve bunlar arasındaki ilişkiyi de kurabilmeli. Bu Arrow'un Impossibility Theorem. Bunlar olmazsa, bunların hepsi birden satisfy edilmezse yok. Impossible. Binmore, as I said, uses Nash bargaining theory, arrives at Rawlsian justice rather than maximization of net collective utility. Who was doing the maximization of net collective utility? Who was? Harsanyi. Harsanyi was doing it. He was trying to resuscitate formal utilitarianism. Yes? And he does this without the use of Rawls' transcendental Kantian moral commitments. Now, this is something very difficult to understand. In Rawls, there is the transcendental moral commitment. Her şeyin Rawls'ta, yani okursanız göreceksiniz, işte ben de son birkaç senedir bunlarla ilgilenmeye çalışıyorum. Üstün, her şeyin üstündeki ahlaki üstünlük var. Transcendental, üstünlük. Hepsinin üstünden gelen. Bu uzatmayayım. What Binmore tries to do is he's trying to use the bargaining theory, which is a game theory, and tries to get at the Rawlsian justice. The Rawlsian justice is on fairness. Yes? Justice as fairness. Fairness. Not utility. Let me give you the example. You can read my book on Adalet Çağrısı, and in the last part of it is about this justice theory. There are, let's say there is one flute. The example is flute there, the play. Somebody produces the flute. And how shall we distribute the flute? Shall we give the flute to the person who can play it? Utility. Shall we give it to somebody who needs it because he hasn't got any money? Or shall we give the flute who has produced it, the Marxian one? Whoever produces should have it. The labor theory of value. Should we give it to the utility? Or should we give it to the poor? Yes? So this is about Rawls. Solo. Now, all of you know about Solo. It's about the endogenous growth models, the income distribution in the long run. Now, there is also a new concept which has been imputed into to economics, the asymmetries of information, over putatively general, a historical, and non-situational model. Now, what is putative? Putative is beating somebody. Yes, it's giving punishment. Yes, and we know that this model is very general, ahistorical, and a non-situational model. We try to criticize the Solow model. Now, what do we do here? These are all, again, topics of interdisciplinarity. As you see, in Binmore, there is a use of game theory with political philosophy. Yes. In Solow, there is a criticism towards it, that it's, although it's long run and it considers income distribution, and although the model is endogenous, the asymmetries of information is not included, and it's quite general, ahistorical, and so on. Now, scientists do not discard prevailing models until replacements are available. This sentence is a very correct sentence. Biz bilim adamları bir şeyin yerine yeni bir model gelmedikçe o açıklamadan çıkamayız. O modelden çıkamayız. O modelle ilgili eleştirilerimiz olsa bile yerine bir şey konulmadıkça ondan kurtulmak zordur. Because in the absence of a model, no one knows what to do that would qualify as knowledge development. One example is the Hershey-Ohlin theorem. All of you know about this theorem, the Marshall-Lerner conditions in international trade. Muammer, you know about the Hershey-Ohlin theorem?
Yeah, I heard in international economics that the countries is expanding their sources that they are best on something and using it as a trade to get maximum utility or
okay. The gravity,
something.
it resembles a gravity model, yes. The underlying theoretical assumption is very banal, says the section. It is true because nothing is so special about it. The Marshall-Lerner conditions had long been known. Now these two guys were basically presented it, yes, in international trade, but nothing unexpected. The public choice models, rather the neoclassical microeconomic models, they suffer from overgenerality, insensitive historical and institutional contingencies, commitment to methodological individualism, and reliance on a version of Homo economicus. Now, these are the public choice models, which are of neoclassical microeconomic models, suffer from issues like overgenerality, insensitive historical institutional contingencies, commitment to methodological individualism, reliance on a version of Homo economicus. Very briefly, you know what the Homo economicus is? It's an assumption. Is one of the basic assumptions of economics, but we know that all Homo sapiens are not Homo economicus. You may have various recent books on people who do not act economically. I mean, If everything was economics, then I wouldn't be a lecturer in the university. Yes, you can't justify everything with money. Methodological individualism, I did tell you what it is. Yes, it looks economics as a single discipline, a separate discipline. Overgenerality is too many assumptions. Yes, too many. Yes, I mean, you don't go into the details. You make a generality assumption, and then otherwise it will be too complex. It is insensitive to historical and institutional contingents. I mean, this is being challenged. I mean, but we're talking about the neoclassical one. I mean, think of, for example, about Acemoğlu. He is looking at the institutional aspects of development. Yes, so he's changing the entire neoclassical approach to development by putting institutional differences into the analysis. Now, mechanism design. Mechanism design is rather simple. It's about the rigor. It's about how things are working. Yes, the design of the working of the system. If you look at the anti-poverty research with the mechanism design, model important variables and control variables, dependent variables, are targeted for reform. Let me explain what this is. We have dependent variables and independent variables. We model important variables, and there are control variables. Important variable is what? Poverty. Control variable is what? How can I control it? How can I control poverty? Yes, this is what I model. With my dependent variables, which is poverty, I try to reform it. I try to get rid of it. This is how I design my policy mechanism. The second one is the game theoretic model that identifies a set of institutional structures acting to value public interest by economic growth rather than impeding rent seeking. Yeah. In the game theoretic model design, I can put the institutional structures and to impede rent seeking. In other words, if I impede rent seeking, what do? Then there won't be the very rich. Then indirectly, I will be able to get rid of poverty. So it's an anti-poverty program. So I will choose in between a higher economic growth, which is for the public interest, or directly impede rent seeking. Yes. So the model, the game theoretic model, will be in between these two: impede rent seeking or act more value, give more value to economic growth, which is for public interest. So this is also another approach. You can either number one, you put dependent variables, independent variables, target variables, and so on. This is one mechanism. The other mechanism is use the game theoretic model for anti-poverty. Pragmatic foundations of welfare and development economics, leaving out the Kantian and Utilitarian normative foundation framework. I did explain you this. Economics, contributions from other disciplines versus patrolling. Yeah, this is simply, there are two approaches. One, in economics. One, you accept getting contributions from other disciplines, or you put barriers to other disciplines, to boundaries of economics, and kind of patrolling its boundaries, and do not let anybody in. Psychology or sociology or biology, you do not let them in, and you stay here. Yes? These two are two approaches in economics. Economics is not blending into psychology or any other discipline. Let's have a 1 or 2 sentences discussion. In our department, for example, I see a lot of my young colleagues who are very much interested in economics, but read very little on sociology, philosophy, history, political science, and so on. Their main interest is to be better in econometrics or in the new techniques of econometrics, which is rather narrow and narrow and narrow, yes? Looks more neoclassical and neoclassical and neoclassical, a unidirectional understanding of economics, which makes it, yes, there's a lot of rigor, but very little progress and contribution to economics. And there we saw this indeed collapsed due to the reason that, due to the most important development is that Nobel Prizes are no more given to such rigor, studies of rigor, but they're given to interdisciplinary studies, experimental studies, behavioral economics, and so on. So experimentation, the final one, the fourth important thing in economics, testing economic hypotheses is a recent and novel phenomenon, you may say. And that's what I said in the last 30 years. Now, the part says, no, it's old. It's old, but it wasn't so common because game theory was not in. So you couldn't do laboratory experimental studies. Now you can do. Replicability of experimentation means you repeat and repeat the same experiment to see that they all merge into the same result. And game theory provides us this possibility. Now, experimentation, there are 4 methodological precepts here. Now, I wrote 5, but one is we can discuss. One is non-satiation. Subjects will always choose the more rewarding yielding medium. İnsanlarda doyumsuzluk vardır, non-satiation. Her zaman daha fazla verene giderler. Experimentation'da. Number 2 is saliency. What is saliency? Something which is obvious. The reward must be increasing in good and decreasing in bad outcomes. Prospect theory, partly. But it must be obvious. The reward must be increasing. I must see it. Obvious. 3, dominance. Rewards must dominate any accruing costs. When I say accruing costs, I'm not saying that losses. We're talking about the accruing costs like participation costs. Bir olaya gireceğim. $1000 kazanma ihtimalim var. Fakat benden $750 katılma bedeli istiyor. Ben kazansam zaten $250 kurtaracağım. O da %100 kazanmayacağım ki. Dominance bu demek. Kazancımın şeylerden fazla olması demek. Accruing cost'lardan. Bu kaybetmem değil. Accruing cost. Number 4 is privacy. Each subject has information only about her own incentives. Now this is very important. Very, very important. In experimentation, the participants do not have information about the other players. It only has perfect information about itself, about its own incentives. Now, the number 5 I put, which can be debated, ethical prescriptions. Now, one example to ethical proscription is non-deception. Proscription is cezalandırma. Ya şey yaparsa, decept ederse ne yapacağız? Yani deceive ederse vermesi gerekeni vermez, alması gerekeni almaz. Yani eksperimentteki kuralın dışına çıkarsa, cayarsa bunu niye kural olarak koymuyoruz? Eksperimentin kuralı olarak koymuyoruz. Tartışılması gereken bir konu. Ontological and Methodological Analysis of Economics. Now, a few final words before I conclude. Why is there economic science? What is the purpose of economic science? Why? This is an ontological issue. It's completely about ontology. The raison d'être of economic science. Do you want me to write raison d'être? Do you know how to spell it? Bunu şimdi uğraştırmayın bana. Bunun üzerinde şöyle bir aksan var, E'nin üzerinde. Tamam. Bunun Fransızcası ama bu kullanılıyor. Okay? To where is economic science evolving? From where is it evolving? What is its destiny? Where is it going to? What do you expect that economic science will be in the next 20, 30 years? Help of other disciplines. These are all methodological issues. Descriptive reasoning and logic. Maths has provided a lot of ease of modeling for us. It has provided a lot for modeling of economics in our subject. Game theory has also provided or contributed to economics by allowing experimentation. Now, for econometric studies, these are all, you see, the tools we can use. Descriptive reasoning or logic in economics. We can use help of other disciplines in economics. We can use maths in economics. They're all separate. I mean, you can use philosophy in economics or sociology, or you can use reasoning and logic and, yes, and try to develop economics. Or you can use mathematics and model and then derive certain results in economics. You can use game theory and use a lot of experimentation and try to achieve certain results. And finally, you can use econometric studies, an application of statistics into economics, and you try to measure and forecast from what had happened. Although it's very difficult on its own, without the use of the others, using econometrics on its own, without theory, without assumptions, without any reasoning, putting unrelated variables and putting them into statistical analysis is meaningless. But econometric studies are also important tools in methodological issues. Now, this is the end. I have talked almost 2 hours. We shall meet next week with, let's start with Tony Lawson, okay? Lawson's orientation. Muammer, it will be you. You will come with a presentation and I shall try to contribute in the meantime, okay? İyi çalışmalar. İyi tatiller, iyi pazarlar.
Hocam son soru. Slide kaç sayfa olsun istersiniz? Yani kaç saate uygun olacak şekilde hazırlayalım? Çünkü
yarım saat, 40 dakika, 45 dakika.
tamam.
2 saat ben konuşuyorum, 2 saat siz konuşmayın. 45
Tamam.
Bir de bir şey sorabilir miyim acaba? Bu hafta içi felsefe olan dersleri benim çalışma saatlerimle çakıştığı için gelemiyorum da siz kaydını alıyorsunuz. Herhangi bir linki var mı acaba?
Yüklemeye çalışıyorum online'a bir. İki, yüklemeye çalışıyorum. Bir tane geçen gün yükleyemedim. Çok uzun geldi. Neden bilmiyorum. Çok uzun konuşmuşum. Onu yükleyemedim. Almadı sistem. Keşke onu sorsaydım ya. Akşamları koymaya çalışıyorum genellikle ders saatlerini. Hep 6'dan sonraya koyuyorum. Philosophy of dersinde bir ders daha yapacağım. Ek ders onu salı akşamı yapacağım. Yolladım zannediyorum size de.
Bizim çakışıyor hocam o.
Efendim?
Salı akşamı makro dersi vardı. Onunla çakışıyor. Aynı 6'da başlıyor o da.
Onun saatini değiştireyim o zaman. Olur, çarşamba'yı falan alırım. Bakarım, olur. Çarşamba boş musunuz hepiniz? Ama filozofi diğer öğrencilere sormam lazım.
Yani.
Okey, belki çarşamba'yı alırım. Tamam.
Bir de hocam haftaya sınav haftası programda sizin dersleriniz de görünüyor. Yani nasıl yapacağız? Biz normal ders programına devam mı edeceğiz herhangi bir sınav yapmadan?
Devam edeceğim. Çünkü geri kaldım ben. Geri kaldım.
Yani monitör için konuşuyorum.
Onlar master dersleri önemli değil. Çünkü orada not girişleri falan orada çok kurallı değil. Ya şuradan çıkmam lazım şeyden bir dakika.